Diggity Daffodil, let's go. Hi everyone, it's Sarah. Nice to see you again. Today, let's talk about character and morality. Now we're getting real deep. Let's go. The way that I see it, the way that it's probably seen overall, morality sets the standards for a society, the expectations, and a person's character is a measure of whether or not he or she is living up to the standards of morality, the standards of the society. You can have good character, you can have bad character, but your character is a measure of who you are. That's why a character in something that is produced, in something that isn't real life, is a representation of a person's character. You get it? There are societies, such as America, who have tried to find the best way to put the best of morality into practice. The thing that America had that a lot of other, and particularly European and other westernized countries, did not have was that we built what we wanted America to be. Some of the ideas of America that are very American is this idea that you can be from anywhere and start from anywhere, and you can become whatever you set your mind to, as long as you put in the hard work and you do have a little bit of luck. There's always a little bit of luck involved. There's nothing you can do about that. But the way that America is designed, it allows for the potential that is inherent within, I'd like to say at least most human beings, to find itself when there is a person who has the desire to use his or her potential. And that's not something that was necessarily seen in other societies. In other societies, your place in society was determined oftentimes by your birth, who you were born to, where you were born, the situation that you happened to be born into. You had very little chance to get out of it. And this is not something that was gotten rid of a very long time ago, even in Western societies. And it's still something that exists very frequently in other places throughout the world. But America did it differently. America did have some stumbling blocks along the way because we did have to figure out where exactly we stood in this line of how we wanted to lay out our society and our values and our morals and how we wanted our American citizens to portray their character. We did this over time by tweaking and adjusting the things that we viewed as important and the way that we viewed our society so that they could become more free, more ideal, more helpful in getting people to be able to find out what they are. What it means to be an American is not based on your ethnic being. It's not based on your feudal understanding of the world around you. It's based on American ideals. And these are derived partially from God and partially from our understanding of philosophy in the world around us as we were able to get from the very old and wise societies, the Greeks, the Romans, the great philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, all of the things that came to give to us these ideas of wisdom, logic, reason, and we mesh those quite nicely with the Western ideals, the Judeo-Christian values that gave us the understanding of the moral grounds. Many of the European societies did have Judeo-Christian values, but they sometimes relied too heavily on them and they became a bit dogmatic, or they did not have the reason, the logic to back them up in the same way that the American society laid out. And they did not have the ability to put it into the greatest of practice because they were so reliant on their definition of, for example, being French based on being born in France for generations before you. For example, I lived in Japan for a year, and even students who were half Chinese and who you really couldn't tell from the other students, even actual students usually couldn't tell, but once they knew they were from somewhere else, there's a very strong culture there that you are not Japanese. This is something that does still live in the world, and it's something that was almost universal for much of human history, and America managed to create a society, an understanding of an American character that is not reliant on where you were born or the society that happened to raise your parents. It's based on the character that you develop as a person who is developing his or her character, his morals, in America. You are American because you come here and you decide to adopt what we've decided to be the strongest and most meaningful morals. And we derive those primarily from our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, these things that lay out what we believe as a country, as a nation, as a republic. We are not democracy. We are a democratic republic. We vote on things, but we are not a pure democracy. Pure democracies tend to lead to mob rule, and it tends to lead to a lot of people not actually being represented, and it also tends to lead to less than pleasant societies. What America allowed is for people to become American, and it allowed them to get out of where they were born if they were willing to work hard, if they were willing to aspire to things that were great. It allowed them to build a life that they wanted to move forward. It allowed them to have a generational life, because what they built, their next generation, their children, their children's children could build on that. It wasn't like a feudal society. It wasn't like a caste system where you are where you started and you will always be there because that is who you are and there's no way out of that. No, that's not what America was set up to be. It was set up to allow you to find ways around that and allow you to use the gifts that you were given by God and the gifts that you were given by genetics, even if they didn't know it was called that at the time, to find out just what you could be, just what you could do. And that is so interesting. That is the American character. The American character is the hard fight. It's the finding what the upper limit is, because there is no upper limit as long as you keep going. That's the American character. And it's built on this idea of morality. And one of the things that is very true in America and in American character is this adherence to a certain set of morals. And those are your Judeo-Christian morals, your Judeo-Christian ideals, which sets up your values, your merit, your the standards of right or correctness that you want people to aspire to. People are not always going to end up at the highest morality, but it is a standard. It is something that you want to work towards. That is one of the American aspirations, is to be a moral person, someone who does moral things. The problem comes when we start losing our base level of morality or our base understanding of morality. One of the ways that you can lose your base understanding of morality is if you begin to remove God from the equation. A lot of people, myself included several years ago, wonder, well, why do we have to have this idea of God in America? Why do we have to have this idea of the Creator? And it's not so much God as, my God, our God, as the Creator, the person who is involved in making this world what it is and making you what you are and I what I am. It's the idea of this power that is above all of us and this power that gives us natural rights. And the thing about it is, if you don't have this God, your rights come from the government. And if a government is giving you rights or anything, the government or any person that is giving you something can take it back, unless it's God. God gives you natural human rights, and therefore no one, no other person, no feudal lord, no king, no government, no emperor can take them away from you, because they are God-given rights. And those are the rights that are important in the understanding of American society. There is, however, a small problem in America. We do want everyone to come to America and become American, in theory. The problem with America being such an unusual place is that we will, theoretically, accept anyone who wants to become American. But in particular, in the past I don't know, several decades or so, this idea of becoming American by adopting American values seems to have shifted somewhat. When I was younger, we were still learning this idea of America being a melting pot. And the idea of that is the sort of thing that I grew up with. I'm a bit of an old school family. We never quite got out of the Depression. We were barely even in America during the the Depression. But we still hold a lot of older values. One of the things that we hold on to is the idea of the melting pot, partially because we are somewhat newer immigrants, before the modern era anyway. And that's the idea that you come here with the intention of becoming American. My family members tweaked their names from their original names. I have one family member who was born here shortly after they got here, and originally on her birth certificate it says her Italian name, and they went back and amended it a year later. So these are the things that we did oftentimes in order to become, to feel, to want to be American. There's a lot of stories that we had to do this, but most of the stories that I've heard from actual older people who went through this, there was a certain amount of pushback from people who were a little weary of new people coming in, but for the most part, people came here because they wanted to become American. They wanted to come here to have the ability to build that life, to build that thing that they can get in America that maybe they can't get elsewhere. And that idea is still alive. That's still something that we export, sort of. It's an idea that's very much alive, especially in places that don't have this idea of getting out of your caste, getting away from your feudal lord in whatever form that still exists. America has this ideal that you will adhere to our morals, or at least not even that you will, but that you will want to. However, something that's been happening more recently is, I looked this up, there's apparently a name for it. Instead of the melting pot, their new idea is the salad bowl, I guess, where instead of melting together, and maybe you get little pieces of bigger things that still remain, but you're still one American pot. Now this idea of a salad bowl is you throw everything in together and you toss it into the air, and you're just kind of there together. And that's not really what America is. It's not meant to be Peruvian and Chinese and Finnish and, South African. You are meant to be American. Italian American, German American, Japanese American, Chinese American, Indian American, whatever. But the point is that you become American. The point is to add that to the end of you. The point is that your children are American. That you want to be American, that your children understand why you wanted to be American. And I think that's something that's sort of being lost here, is this idea that the American character has been so diluted, the idea that the morality of the system is starting to fade such that it's not so coherent anymore. And, well, here's something nobody really wants to talk about. One of the reasons for a long time that America did not accept people from certain regions is because of the difficulty of integrating them and having them desire to adopt Americanism. These tended to be people who had vastly and extremely different views of morality or moral views than what was acceptable in America. For example, for a long time we didn't take in a whole lot of people who happened to be Muslim. And the reason for that was because they are so fundamentally different from the Judeo-Christian values, at least societally. It is a very different society, you have to admit that. Or people who are not European, in general. Here's the thing, once you go over to the East, the Far East, it's pretty different. And if you come from a place that has entirely different values, entirely different morals, entirely different basis for understanding the world, it's very hard to integrate, and it's very hard to become American. And if you can't have that base level of understanding of morality, if you can't have that base aspiration for the American character, then it's very hard to have a coherent society, at least as far as America is concerned. In a lot of other countries where they have given up on having whatever it was that defined them, they're seeing a lot of confusion, a lot of concern come up about the future of their societies. And America is no different. It's just that we have a different place to start from, a different set of concerns and a different set of things that we need to address. What I think that we need to do is remember the American morals, the American character. Sometimes I will go out, and I happen to, for whatever reason, come across a bunch of old film reels from, I guess it would have been like the 50s and the 60s even. The thing about these old film reels is that a lot of them were moral education. I'm assuming these are the things that they were teaching in public schools or somewhere of some importance. There were certain ones about how you wanted to become a productive member of society, There were ones that were about, one of my favorites, just because of the kind of person I am, was of this older gentleman who was watching his son in some sort of a debate or an orator club, who he was looking at his son and saying, "You're so good at speaking, son. How can I do this?" And the son goes, "Well, father, here's a dictionary and here's a thesaurus, and expand your vocabulary and listen to the radio more often and read more and find the ways that the English language sounds the best and use them." And it was only about a 10-minute video, and this older gentleman goes through this whole process, and by the end of it, he's giving a speech at town hall, and it was really quite nice, because that was one of the American ideals, that you were going to be as educated as you could be. You were going to sound as good as you could. You were going to want to use the American language, the English American language, in a way that was lovely and beautiful and kind to the ears and understandable to your peers. And it was a very nice video. But they had all sorts of videos about the morality of growing up, and they had these teenagers who, some would do the wrong thing and some would do the right thing, and some would go out and some would do some raunchy things with other people, and some would say, "Listen, Sally, I've had a very nice time with you and I'd like to go out with you again, but I'm not going to go into your house even if your parents aren't home." There was one that I saw about including a girl in activities who was particularly antisocial, and you were supposed to include her because it was the right thing to do, because it was just the way that you were to people. And you had all of these other ones about how to be productive, how to go and have a job, how to be useful in the way that you did your work. There were other ones that were related to other aspects of morality, such as what you do prior to a marriage, what you do when you have a marital squabble, when you have serious marital troubles, when you have this idea that I got married but maybe I shouldn't have because now I'm giving up on my youth, although we don't really see that too often these days, at least not around where I am. There were so many of these wonderful little thoughts about how the world used to be and the sort of things that that America used to aspire to. This was the golden days of what we knew as American values. And of course, not everybody actually lived up to it, but it wasn't that big of a deal because most people understood that this is what we were aspiring to. And yeah, there were going to be people who weren't going to go along with it, and there were going to be people who were going to have trouble with it, but that was at least the ideal. And that was the ideal because we had people who had been raised and people who understood this is what they were coming into and this is what was expected of them. It concerns me, and it concerns a lot of other people I've known of who think about these things, and it concerns them that this basic level of understanding of the morality of the American character is muddled. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of concerning trends. People who want to be true socialists, people who want to destroy the American ideals at the heart of them, which shows a complete and fundamental lack of understanding about what they are. I understand how these things become such a problem because, quite frankly, our education on the history of these things and our moral and character education is completely out the window. And I think part of that is just that these ideas that are counter to the American ideals, these ideas that were often derived from failed and very bad societal ideals from elsewhere, seem to creep into our university systems, and then they became mainstream in the university systems, and then they became creeping their way down into the younger grades and the younger grades, and now they're basically, from the first time that a kid sees a public school teacher, they have these ideas in their head. It is built into the curriculum, trust me, I know. There are so many wonderful things to be derived from the American morals and the American ideals and the character of being an American. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of other places that have excellent characters and excellent morals and wonderful ideals, but the fact is we did it in a very specific and a very special way. And I don't think it's the sort of thing that we should be giving up on so easily. There are still plenty of people who want to come here specifically because we are so spectacular that way. And the fact that the American people seem to be so willing and wanting to give up on that which makes us is, well, it's not good. It's not happy. I'm not pleased with it. Well, I mean, this is just another one of those things. If you know about it, if you know the sort of things that you should be aspiring to, if you know the sort of things that are desirable because they have the American values, because they have value in morality, because they have a good character, because you want to build a good character. If you have these aspirations for yourself, you're doing okay. In my personal opinion, every person should want to build on their moral character. They should want to build on their personal character. They should want to make of themselves something that is spectacular so that they can share it with the world and the world can see just what you're made of. To a certain degree, I really like the idea that these ideals were at least partially derived from God. Because you are, in theory, and I know we don't all believe the same thing, and that's, well, more or less fine, but you believe in this idea, sort of, at least if you're here, right? If you believe that these things were bestowed upon you from the Creator, if you believe that your rights are, well, the rights that are most important, your human rights, those rights, those are bestowed from a Creator, it's not that it came from somebody in the past. It's not that it's derived solely from the mind, great or otherwise, elsewhere. It's this idea that they are divine, and that to whatever degree you are touched by it, you also are divine. So if you have the wisdom to go through and find the greatest things that make morality, if you find the wisdom in the great thinkers of the past to find where your character lies, the things that you deem to be true, the things that you deem to be the most important parts of you, if you find the divine laying hand upon you and helping you to derive your character, then that's a good start. Let's be there. Let's start there. Let's share that with our friends. I think that if we get back to this idea of having a standard of morals, if we get back to this idea that good character is an aspirational thing, I think if we can get there as a whole, we're going to be much better off. And I think if we can hold that as a standard, this idea of upholding our moral character, we're going to be able to figure out a lot of these things that are not quite in line right now. And maybe if we do have this moral character, we can say to others who are struggling or who are having some sort of a problem with it, we can say to them, let me help you. Or we can simply show through example ways that maybe they want to be, maybe ways that they want to adopt, things that they can aspire to. You can be aspirational if you work on becoming somebody who is to be aspired to. So find a way to be great and find a way to be wonderful and build your character and take up your morals and hold them high. And then you can stand tall, knowing that you are just slightly divine. Thanks for talking with me. I'll see you next time.